Hello, my name is Gray.
And my name is Crystal.
And this is Busty Asian Beauties, a supernatural commentary podcast where I, someone who has seen this show several times,
And I, someone who only knows the show through social media, discuss every single episode of Supernatural from start to finish. Also, we are both Asian.
both Asian. For today's episode, we will be discussing Season 4, Episode 11, Family Remains. Written by Jeremy Carver, directed by Phil Segresha.
Jeremy Carver will just have Sam say fucking anything for Dean character development.
No, for fucking real. This is so... The thing is, you messaged me about this episode way before I watched it. So you watched it before me. And I will read the messages that you did send me.
Okay.
This episode is so corny. You already did the benders. You can be done now. And then you replied after like a couple of minutes. I feel mixed to negative about SPN so much it's unreal. And then in a bit you reply again. Actually, it's okay. And then you go, no, I'm back to mixed to negative. Which, this did in fact color my watching of this episode.
Oh,
because
apologies.
I didn't know what this episode was gonna be about.
Oh, no, you didn't know the twist?
No, I had absolutely no recollection.
I knew the twist before I came in.
I didn't know anything about this episode. Nothing. So, like, when you were like, you already did the benders, I was like, oh, it's gonna be a human being.
I spoiled it all.
But the funny thing is, the entire time, like, I already knew that, like, there was a girl who killed the guy at the beginning of the episode. And I was like, yeah. But for some reason, I was still thinking, maybe the family. It's like a cannibal family. Like, I was still in deep. Because they were like, they were obviously like building up that they have secrets or whatever. They're going through
right,
some
and you thought the secret was that they cannibalized?
Yeah, maybe the secret is that
so
they're evil, mass murderers. And
true.
I was like looking forward to that, and then the twist was there is a girl in there. And I was like, okay, fine, whatever.
Sorry.
But honestly, it's okay. Honestly, I do not agree with you on this episode.
You liked it?
I think it was extremely entertaining. Whether I like it or not is up for debate. But
there was a twist that she had a secret twin.
It was the stupidest fucking thing. I don't know why they did it, and then they never acknowledged it before or after. Wow, they're crazy. But, I thought it was entertaining. Which is, different from it being good.
That she had a secret twin. It opened with the guy being like, oh my god, it's impossible, how are you here? But he was secretly feeding her the whole time. Why was it impossible that she was there?
No, I really liked that it was like we were looking into the psyche of like another person, There was another family here, and we do get insight on who they are and the things that they've been through and how this is going to affect them. Because, like, one of my issues with Supernatural is they keep doing this thing where like, a person learns about bullshit, whatever, goes through a very traumatic experience, and they come out of it like, oh my god, thank you so much. Like, I really want to kiss you right now, But, like, this episode...
a slight improvement on that, but it
it
does imply that her brother getting murdered is what saved her marriage, so...
No, but, like, you know what I mean. Like, it has this impact of, like, this will affect them.
Yeah, that part is true.
And I like that. I really like that. Although I would say everything else about this episode is so fucking goofy. Yeah, I mean, I'll bring up the shit when we get to it so that I don't
Did
just
he
ramble
teach
on
her
for
how
the
to
entire
spell
beginning.
while she was living in the walls? Like, she
I
was
know.
able to spell too late out in blood. Even though,
She's
according
a
to Sam,
go.
she's barely human or whatever the fuck.
Okay. That's what... We'll get into it. I mean, this episode is entertaining. I would say that. It's not boring. Which is, you know, there are episodes of Supernatural that are so...
It's not boring. It's not
so
boring
humdrum.
because I'm just flummoxed by how any of this can be true.
I mean, yes. And also, like, Sam's, like, reaction to the whole thing, Dean's reaction to the whole thing. This is... You know what? Jeremy Carver, as we've said before, is good at comedy. He writes funny episodes. And this
he
episode,
tried
I think...
to be serious, and
He tried
instead
to be
he
serious.
was so unserious.
I think that's the best way to describe this episode. It is so unserious.
It is not the Jonker from the movie The Jockner.
It is unserious, and also, like, it is so funny when you think about literally anything. And, like, in a like, what the fuck kind of way, you know?
Yeah.
Because many times in this episode, I was like, what? And, I mean, it sure is, you know? At least I was thinking. Because, usually when I watch an
It was
episode of Supernatural...
intellectually stimulating.
It was. Because it was so funny. But usually when I watch an episode of Supernatural, when I watch anything, really, I'm also doing something else. Like, I'm knitting, I'm crocheting. I keep my hands occupied. It's just how I watch things. But this episode, I really was watching it. Like, I put down my knitting to watch this episode because I thought it was that entertaining. So, that's something to say about it.
I guess it is.
Yeah. So, well, going in, what did you learn about it? And also, I'm very curious as to how you knew the twist.
I think I just saw a post once that was like, it was like, oh, like a list of like the scariest episodes of Supernatural, or someone asking like, what do you think is the scariest episode of Supernatural? And someone I followed
said this.
mentioned Family Remains, and they were like, or the episode said Family Remains, and the person in the tags was like, was that the one where Sam and Dean spent so long trying to convince a family that ghosts were real, but it turned out to be children living in the walls? So I knew that it was humans living in the walls.
This is the opposite of Scoobynatural. Like, here, they were like, they're ghosts, and it was literally a human being. And in Scoobynatural, they were like gaslighting the Scooby gang that, like, it wasn't a ghost, you guys are crazy. Which is honestly such an odd thing to do in a... I don't fucking know. We'll get into
Wait, was it like, we're gonna
to
preserve the innocence of these children, but they weren't children
Yes.
when Dean Winchester was hitting on one of them earlier?
It was literally like, oh, they're so distraught over having ghosts. Look, they knew there were ghosts. Like, the Scooby Gang saw the ghost and totally believed that there were ghosts. And then Sam and Dean orchestrated this thing where it's like, oh, but like, it's not actually a ghost. It was an
Cass under a
apparition.
sheet.
It was a human being who was haunting you all and trying to get rid of you. Ghosts aren't real. You guys never even believed it. Like, you guys were just thinking that you believed it. It was a wild thing
That's
to
very
watch, quite
different from
honestly.
their usual thing. Why?
No, because, like, Dean wanted to preserve, you know, their I don't know what the word is. I don't know words in English. You know, they were happy people.
AO3 user for real. He does care about fictional characters more than real people.
He fucking does. Well, anyway, is that all you knew about this episode?
Yeah, but I could guess, like, the rest of the twist as soon as the housekeeper said that the daughter killed herself.
Well, I mean, the fact that it was her daughter, I didn't see that coming. I thought it was still her.
Oh, but, like, I guess because I knew it was a human, so, like, she was not old enough to be her.
Yeah, but like, they did bring that up, and I was like, I don't know, maybe she has a banger skincare routine. Like, who fucking knows?
Maybe eating
she's the
raw
opposite
rats.
of Peter Capaldi.
Okay, the thing about that episode that haunts me is that I said that he was 58, but, like, he was 55 or 56, and I knew that, and I said that in the post, so I don't know why I messed up on the age. Like, I'm a fucking fake fan, and everyone should laugh at me and throw tomatoes at me forever.
Yeah, exactly. I love how we're talking in this episode, like, everyone who listens to this episode also listened to that episode.
Of course they
And you know
did.
what? It's probably true. It's probably true. Like, why are you listening to an episode of a Supernatural podcast for the episode Family Ribbons if you're not a consistent listener? But yeah. God, we should start. We've been talking for so long.
Okay, sure.
We start off with a road so far where they show Cass, and I did
And
get
for
my
what?
hopes up a little bit. I was like, he's here. Is he gonna be here? Maybe.
Nope.
No, he's not. It's not happening.
It's so Jover.
But yeah, what else did they show? It was like Dean being like, oh, I tortured people, put them in the rack. Stuff like that.
They really AMV edited this one. Like, there's, like, the part at the end of the last, or an episode before that, where Dean's like, they, like, carved and tore, like, every part of me. But, like, it's like, he says they carved, and then it flashes to him in hell, like, in pain, and then he goes, and tore, and then it flashes to the same clip of him in hell, but slightly zoomed in.
Exactly. They knew what they were doing. I wish, everyone else who made this episode also felt the same way, but it's okay.
Yeah.
We should be less mean to the writers, because they are having a strike, and I want to be clear that I do support that. I just also am very much a hater.
Yeah, I support the strike, but I do think an AI could write a better episode of Supernatural than this.
Do not say that. Do not say that.
Okay, yeah, they probably couldn't, because they can only work off of previous data, and the previous data is also from the Supernatural writers, so it's shit data.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I don't think Supernatural can be what it is if it does not have Sarah Gamble's twisted psyche embedded all over the first few seasons,
It's true. It's true. She did write some very important episodes.
Mm-hmm. So, go
I
writers.
forgot that the Supernatural writers are still, like, writers. I just sort of assumed that, like, they took them out back and shot them like a lame horse. But yeah, I guess Sarah Gamble did You, which everyone says is, like, good.
Yeah, I'm not gonna watch it though, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm not gonna watch it though.
I watched Trixie and Katya's episode on it.
Okay.
On, like, the last season of it. And apparently, this guy was, like, being blackmailed for being a murderer by another murderer, and I was like, yeah, that's fun.
Oh, yeah. I heard that, like, yeah, the most recent girl was, like, a twisted psychopath or whatever.
Yeah. Hashtag psychopathy. Well, we start off the episode in a good old... Well, this house is a house in the country, like in the middle of a farm. It's a very pretty house. I would say that. It's like big, spacious, etc.
It's nice. Though it's sort of grimy right now.
I didn't notice that, I don't think. I was still at my knitting
era. Maybe it was just
era
the lighting
while I was
that
watching
made it
this.
seem like it was grimy.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about me is... it takes me maybe 10 minutes into watching a Supernatural episode before I realize that I probably need to put my brightness to the max so that I can see anything. So, like, for the first 10 minutes, I'm just like, what's happening? What's happening? And then I realize, like, oh, okay, like, I can actually control the brightness so I can figure out what is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so horrible how dim every Supernatural episode is. I mean, it's like a nice look. Like, I know I'm gonna miss it once they get like fully into sitcom lighting. But right now, it just hurts my eyes so much to switch to my notes-taking Google Doc, which is like all white. Like, after I have cranked the brightness to the max in order to see what the fuck those men in jeans are doing.
Well, we start off in said house, and there is a guy there. And
Sure
he is watching, like, a show on the television, and then suddenly, power goes out.
Right, okay. So is that just, like, does she have control of the power, or does it just happen coincidentally?
I think she has control over the power. Maybe this is like a parasite situation.
Right, yeah. With the flicking the lights Morse code thing.
Yeah. He tries to go out, but the door is locked. And then suddenly, this lady who looks like a ghost comes out. And then he goes, it's impossible.
Impossible! He literally has been feeding her the whole time. What is he talking about?
Anyway, he just goes like, stay away from me, blah, blah, blah. And then the girl, attacks.
Yep.
And that's the end of our teaser.
Blood splashes on the home sweet home cross stitch is like how they show that he died, which is fun but also corny. We're in the Impala, and like they're parked out like near some trees, and Sam's sleeping in the back seat. He's so cute. And Dean's looking through newspapers and shit. And Sam's like, oh my god, why are you looking for a job so much? Like, we've been working nonstop for a month. We just finished a job 2 hours ago. This sucks. And Dean's like, no, I will sleep when I'm dead. I'm fine. I'm good. And Sam tells him that he can't run for forever. And Dean's like, oh yeah, well, what am I even running from? And Sam says, from what you told me. Like, i.e. the torturing souls in hell thing. And then he goes, are we pretending that never happened? And Dean pretends that it never happened by just talking about the case that we saw in the teaser. Sam's like, okay, that does sound like a ghost. And Dean's like, uh-huh, so we should check it out. And Sam does, like, a fun thing where he, like, sighs and then he just, like, fully flops back down in the back seat. Like, you just see his head go down. Love that.
I think he's so real for that. My commute to school is insane. And
it's like
every
4
time
hours,
I arrive...
right?
Well, it's 4 hours total. It's 2 hours to and 2 hours from.
That's still disgusting.
But every time I arrive on campus, I go... If I don't have classes immediately, I go straight to the library. And there's like a couch situation in the 6th floor. And I just plop my head down. And seeing Sam do this, I was like... I understand being on the road. Like, I get it. 2 hours a month, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It literally is. It is. Also, like, the cases in Nebraska.
Yes. Which is so Ethel Kane of them.
What can you tell me about Nebraska? The only thing I know about that place is...
It's near Kansas.
Something about that cool Nebraska guy. Something about baby.
What?
I'm singing a song. Fuck off.
What is the song?
It's a Lady Gaga song. Lady Gaga Nebraska song. It's called You and I.
Huh.
It's like, I think her like it's her country hit or whatever. And it's like, baby, like, we're drinking whiskey and something about you and I, and you're a cool Nebraska guy. So, yeah. I mean, what?
Yeah.
Why do I know this? What do you mean, why?
I don't know, no. I mean, that makes sense. Like, Lady Gaga's a famous musical artist.
Yeah.
I really don't know anything about Nebraska. Ethel Cain has a song called A House in Nebraska, available
Slay.
on all streaming platforms. But that's
Yeah.
about all I know, and that it's close to Kansas, like it's bordering Kansas.
Well, what are they gonna plant there? Like, what is Nebraska known for agriculturally?
I don't actually know. Let's see.
What is a major
Nebraska
agriculture in Nebraska? Corn!
agriculture.
It's a corn place.
I feel like everywhere that's an agriculture place is a corn place because of the
No.
U.S. like subsidy whatever things regarding corn.
Oh yeah, that's why corn syrup you have in everything. Yeah.
Yeah, there's high fructose corn syrup. There's corn in like all animal feeds, even though like corn and cow feeds like
Yeah,
causes
it's
them
not
to create
good
more
for them.
methane and fucks up the air. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, you have potatoes in Idaho. I know that.
that's true.
And then
Good
you have
point.
peaches in Georgia.
That's true.
I think you have weed in Colorado. I don't know if that's the major agriculture.
I don't think it's the major, but yeah, there's weed in Colorado and in California.
Yeah.
And
That's true.
probably elsewhere nowadays.
Who is this from Supernatural? There's a guy who was like growing weed in his bathtub, and then he goes, "That's not
Yes.
weed."
It was
from
the
here,
fucking.
right?
It was the guy they fucking murdered in Dream a Little Dream of Me, right?
Yeah. That is still the funniest episode of this show. They literally just killed the guy. After an entire season of we shan't kill people, Sam.
Yeah.
It's bad.
They didn't even talk
just
about
kill
it
the guy.
afterwards.
I love
Like it was just
Supernatural.
business as usual.
Yeah.
They sent his abusive dad to beat him to death.
And then he died in his sleep. Crazy.
God. What the hell? Anyway, Supernatural is a show.
It truly is. Well, you know, Sam and Dean drive through the country and they see the house, and there's like a thing where there's a sign that's like house for sale, and I guess there was supposed to be like a sign over it that says sold, but
Yeah.
the sign fell down, so they
Yeah.
didn't know that it was already sold.
Yep.
So they go to the farm, and there's this very long sequence. Did you notice this? Like, they just climb up the stairs and open the
Yes,
door.
and Sam, the way Sam climbs the fucking stairs, I'm obsessed with him. So, like, the stairs,
obsessed
there's, like,
with him. This
steps,
is
but
true.
then there's, like, you know, like, the flat area in between, like, sequences of steps. And, like, Sam switches between walking like a totally normal person and fucking, like, jog hopping up the stairs. Like, he has, like, you know the jogging thing where you have your hands and fists and, like, you're moving your arms? Like, he fucking does that for, like, sets of 5 steps.
I love him. Also, it's just a weird thing because it was completely silent. Nothing was happening aside from, you know, we're watching them walk up the stairs, and
I
then
think they just did that to make fun of Jared Padalecki for how he climbs stairs.
they open the door. Like Dean, like picks the lock or whatever, and the whole time I was thinking, oh, is this one of those episodes where they're so obviously like running out of material and like there's just so much time that they need to occupy or whatever? And I was ready for that kind of episode, but this is
But
not that
no.
kind of episode. This episode
In
is
fact,
full.
they cut out the whole part where they talk about how the diary reveals that it was a twin so that they could show Sam climbing the stairs.
They literally cut out any mention of the twin brother other than his dad to make room for this climbing up the stairs shot. And I respect that. You know,
They were
know
right
their
to do it.
priorities. Yeah. Dean enters the house, makes some quip about it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, but like there's one homicide. I guess this place is gonna sell really well. And then they just start walking around. This episode does start very slowly. Like, it's just a house, and they're just walking around, and he he's opening cabinets. They're just like knocking at the walls, which I respect. And every couple of shots is interspersed with a shot of like somebody looking at them from inside the wall.
Yeah, it's like a POV thing where they're looking through the slats.
And it did make me think of, what's that? The Joe episode? No Exit?
No Exit, yeah.
Yeah. Which, that was actually a ghost. And they fucking imprisoned him there with concrete, which is, always a fun idea to do. But it has that vibe of like, oh, there's somebody looking at you through the walls. And then Dean finally like knocks at the wall and notices that it's a different kind of knock. And he realizes that it's wood instead of, concrete. Sam says that it's probably a dumbwaiter, which is, old houses have them. A dumbwaiter is like an elevator for food, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that common? Like, have you ever been in a house?
I've never been in a house with a dumbwaiter.
Yeah, okay. It is a very fascinating word, dumbwaiter.
I guess because it's like a waiter that brings you food, except it's a machine, so it's stupid. That's fun.
Yeah, but like, it's so mean. Don't be mean. Don't be mean. That's all I have to say about it.
I understand.
Anyway, they do this little bit where Dean goes like, "Oh, know-it-all." And
yeah,
Sam's like,
Sam
"What?"
goes, "What did you say?"
And then Dean's like, "What?
Huh? What? No? That must have been the ghost,
him.
Sam.
I think there's a ghost here.
You're crazy.
I think there's a ghost here telling you that you're a fucking know-it-all. I mean, it's just what I heard." He's so funny. He's so funny for this.
He's not funny.
I love it when siblings are annoying to each other.
That's true.
Let it be
but
said.
it doesn't make them funny. It makes them siblings.
They go in and, well, there's nothing. I mean, we learn later that this place was completely fucking. It was horrible in here. Like when the guy died, like the way it was described is he was everywhere. So
yeah,
the fact that this space is spectacular is like, oh well, And then
good realty company.
Yeah, and they open a closet. There's a doll head in there,
just like in Yellow Jackets. The eyes are removed.
Maybe.
So,
the eyes are removed? I didn't notice that.
Or at least it looked like it. Or the lighting was so bad that just the eyes looked like they had been removed.
Well, this exploration is cut off by a moving truck and a car coming in. They realize that the place is in fact bought by someone already. And now they're here.
So, we cut to, the family, and they're such a, like, capital letters, normal American family. It, like, made me physically ill to look at them. Like, there's, like, a son, Danny, and his dog, and they're both rambunctious or whatever, and then there's, like, the parents, and then there's, like, a daughter, and she's on their phone. We get a conversation where it is made clear that there is no cell signal out here, which is...
It never comes up ever again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just helpful to know, because it's like, as soon as you know it's like a real person, like, I feel like a hashtag normal American family would call the cops, so like, I guess it's like well, they can't call the cops because there's no cell signal.
Yeah, but like, I think they can.
But yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
There was cable. The guy had cable, so.
That's true. Oh, and also there's an uncle, the mom's brother. We learn things about their lives. They moved here from far away. We find out later they moved here from 400 miles away. Like, you are ruining your teenage daughter's life if you're moving away from all of her friends and now she can't even talk to them anymore.
That's true. 400
Uh,
miles to kilometers, because I am in fact not American. 643 kilometers. I respect that. Aren't the like 500 miles guys like Scottish or something? Do they also
yeah,
use
the
meters,
Proclaimers.
miles in? Yeah.
Yeah, they
Do they also use miles?
I think they do use miles in, like, cause
Yeah.
I know they do miles per hour at least for driving speeds in
The UK.
like the UK, and I learned that from Good Omens. So yeah, maybe they do
Damn.
miles in general as well.
Well, I mean, it's
Uncertain.
a British, imperial unit. But I don't think they use it anymore. But maybe they did in the past.
Yeah,
I have
perhaps.
no idea. I have no idea what I'm fucking talking about. Slaycation.
Vacation.
What is happening?
Which is what this family is embarking on.
Yeah, they're going through a slaycation.
So,
Wait, this
Yeah.
house is a 3-bedroom. Where the fuck
Yeah.
is the uncle sleeping?
good question.
Because, like, the kids are in separate rooms, and I'm assuming the
Yeah.
couple is in a one room. Is the uncle just, like, out in the couch, like, yeah?
Maybe he's like sleeping on the floor of the couple's room. Who knows?
I respect that.
So, I don't know. They're just talking to each other, establishing a dynamic where it's the teenage daughter who's on the phone and the, like, uncle who's, like, her friend and, like, a jokey guy. And then, like, it ends on this shot where, the husband Brian and the wife Susan are looking at the house, and he's like hugging her from behind, and they're both looking up at the house, and like I truly did want to throw up. Like, stop doing that shit.
What do you mean?
I just don't like this sort of pose. Like, you're not taking prom photos. Like, what are you doing with your lives? Also, like, the women's outfits in here are so 2000s. Like, the mom's wearing, like, a puffy jacket, but, like, a puffy jacket vest, and the daughter's wearing, like, basically, like, a fucking Abercrombie jacket with, like, a fur lining on the hood. Like, I
Yeah.
remember my Abercrombie jacket with fur lining on the hood.
I also do fucking remember having an Abercrombie jacket with fur in the hood. I
Yeah.
fucking love that thing.
Yeah, it was like my go-to jacket, even though
It was also my
Abercrombie's like
go-to.
an awful company.
It was my go-to. We bought it at like one of those, like, what they call it. It's like the store, but like it's cheap. What's that called?
Wait, like the
Con
same?
something.
Like,
It is
I
the
don't know.
store, but like it's cheap. And like
Like the
you find it in like
factory
gas
store?
stations and stuff. Yeah,
Oh,
it's a
huh.
factory outlet, yeah.
cool, yeah.
My sister had the blue one and I had the red one. It was a wonderful, wonderful time.
Aw, I had a blue one and then later a gray one when I outgrew the blue one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love jackets. They are my ride or die.
Yeah, agreed. Abercrombie, the general store, was so horrible to be in because my sister liked getting clothes from there. So, like, we'd all have to go there. But, like, they don't make clothes for people who are average weight, you know? Or above that.
Okay, yeah.
It's, like, awful. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I like in American sizes, I am a medium to large. Which means in Filipino size, I'm a double XL. Which,
Yeah.
makes life quite miserable. Yeah, because
Yeah.
Asian sizes are significantly smaller, I think. So, like, shopping in, like, a normal store that is, like, not, like, American sizes, always been horrible.
Yeah. But their reverie is broken by Sam and Dean, like, running down the stairs, trying to, like...
I love it!
Yeah, trying to sneak out or do something. And then, like, you know, the dad's like, hi, what? And they pull out their fake, code inspector badges and go, hello, we're county code enforcement. And, there's a fucking problem with the building. There's asbestos in the walls and a gas leak. So, that means that no one is allowed to live here, and you all have to go stay at a motel. And if you don't, you are gonna get a fine or go to jail. And the family's all like, oh, I don't wanna, because we just got here, blah, blah, blah. Bro, it's fucking asbestos. I guess, was
so
asbestos
funny.
not as big of a problem back then?
Like, at one point, the wife goes like, asbestos? Meaning what? I was like, meaning what? What? Like, why are you asking this? There's asbestos in the walls. I love it.
Yeah, though, are the health effects, like, not immediate? Because I remember there was, like, an episode of, like, fucking House Hunters or Property Brothers or something on HGTV where, like, they've been in there for, like, a while, and then they're like, so the inspection came back and there's asbestos in the walls.
I mean, I think it a little bit is like mercury.
Okay,
or lead or whatever, where it's like
a gradual poisoning.
I don't know. Actually, I don't know. What's the thing on the paint? That's lead, right?
But yeah, it's lead paint, and that, like,
yeah,
I don't know, fucks with, like, kids a lot.
Yeah, mostly. Yeah. Or, like, I don't know. Let's not spread misinformation in our podcast
about real things instead of supernatural. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They are like, okay, fine, we'll stay in a motel for one night, but we aren't even gonna call anyone to remove the asbestos from the walls over the night.
Yeah, because, like, health inspectors are not allowed to, like, touch up your house. This is, like, a thing. Because, like, it's, what do you call it? Like,
interest?
Conflict of interest. Yeah. Like, they're legally not allowed to do that. So, like, they just did not call anyone, and I respect that. They were like, we're gonna solve this problem by tomorrow. And by tomorrow, I mean, we're gonna call someone tomorrow. R.I.P.
Yeah. Yeah. And the daughter says some shit like, another motel? Awesome, Dad. I hope this one has hooker sheets like the last one. What are hooker sheets?
I don't know.
What does
I guess,
she
like,
mean?
If you're, like, in a motel that's specifically, like, a hookup motel, and then it's designed in a tacky way, like...
Dictionary says it's a quilted polyester bedspread at low-budget hotels that may or may not ever get cleaned.
Ew!
Yeah. Anyway...
God, best motel experience in Supernatural is still the one in Providence. I don't know why they did that, but I'm glad they did. It's always in my head and in my heart.
Yeah, thanks, Phil, for that one.
Yeah.
The nicest motel they ever stayed in is still the Yellow Fever one, where there's, like a door between the bedroom and the living room area. Like, what the hell? That's fancy.
Sam and Dean go to... a woman's house who I guess is the caretaker of this place, and she is also the one who found the guy when he died. Wait, I'm gonna burp. Okay.
Don't even cut it out. Like, do they still, in the more recent life in the world to come, do they still keep in all the burps?
I think I have listened to one where they, like, burp, or, like, somebody burped.
Yeah, no,
I respect
like, the
that.
earlier episodes, like, there's, like, 3 burps per episode. They do not bother cutting that shit out.
I respect that.
Yeah.
So, she says that it was a gruesome scene. She has been his house cleaner for a while. And Dean was like, oh, so do you know him at all? And she goes, not really. He was very private. I think it's because his wife died in childbirth. And his daughter hanged herself in the attic and stuff like that.
Yeah, and at this
20 years
point,
ago,
I
apparently.
wrote, okay, my theory is here that obviously the daughter was pregnant at 20, maybe she was raped by her dad, and the creepy wall girl is her daughter. So I called it, 5 minutes in the episode, just so you know.
How do you make that leap?
I just assume that, I don't know, it has to be, bad or whatever.
Because they're in the country and supernatural.
Yeah, and also Supernatural, loves, just, taking every single stereotype about the country and putting it in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, for some reason, I sort of thought that she'd given birth and then put the daughter in the wall herself as a, stay safe and away from, the guy who raped me. So, I guess that's why I thought that was the situation.
It is wild to think that, if we are to assume that she killed herself, before the kids were grown, to a certain childhood, this man, raised these children.
Yeah, sort of. He just, threw food into the wall, I guess.
They were babies.
Yeah, no, actually, yeah, they can't eat food.
They can't even drink water. You can't give water to a baby.
Yeah, was he going out to the stores and, buying, formula and, mixing it up and then, tossing it on the ground for them to slurp? What was the situation?
It was wild. It's frankly, I don't know. We can be, nitpicky about this episode, and we're never gonna get an answer ever. But
maybe she stayed around for the first few years of their life, but then you would think that the diary would fucking mention that they were twins.
Yeah, I think we are to presume that she died immediately after birth or something.
Yeah, immediately after childbirth or something. Yeah, I feel that was the implication that I thought was whatever. So yeah, how they could not have they can't eat anything.
Yeah. Anyway, she goes to get some pictures and then hands it to Sam and Dean. They keep the pictures. Sam asks why the daughter killed herself. She goes, I don't know. But they were cremated. And also, Dean asked if she ever noticed anything about the house. Oh, are the lights going on and off? Blah, blah, blah. And the woman just goes no, but there was one thing. I heard rustling in the walls a rat. And then they just went back to the house.
Back at the house, the moving truck and the family have returned. Because the Uncle Ted is I'm a person who builds houses, that's my job, and I went in and I inspected, and there's no asbestos, and there's no gas leak, and those guys were total fakes.
How the hell did he do that? Did he buy, materials that were, asbestos detector?
How do you test if there's asbestos in the walls?
I think there's, a tester.
Huh.
And then the gas leak is CO something. CO meter or something? I don't know.
Yeah, perhaps.
There's gotta be, equipment that you need for sure.
Yeah, but
you can't just, lick the wall and be okay, I licked the wall and it tastes like asbestos,
Maybe he's the 10th Doctor. Who knows?
Yeah, if he sat down and was oh, I started hallucinating after 3 hours, there's a gas leak here. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good way to detect gas leaks, I feel.
That's true. Everyone should do that in the future. Who needs home inspectors?
Yeah. There's You know Jenny Nicholson? I love her. She's a YouTuber that I love very much. And she has this
do a
episode
thing where she was a Raylo.
I don't think she was a Raylo. I think she was specifically like, Raylos are so fucking funny. Like,
wait, who was the person who was a Raylo?
I don't know. I mean, she read like a published book that was a Raylo fanfiction.
Oh, the fucking
originally.
love hypothesis. I can't go into Barnes and Nobles
not
anymore.
that.
It's
Not even
always
that.
there.
Not even
what?
that.
There's another one.
There's so many. But, like, she just made fun of it. I don't think she's a Raylo, but maybe she is. And you know what? Summer's made it happen.
False accusations. Perhaps she isn't.
Yeah. Anyway, there's, like, a whole deal where she reviewed the TV show that was, like, a ghost hunting show. And basically, the format of the show is a family comes to them and they're like, our house is haunted. And they start talking about why the house is haunted. And then the next segment is a house inspector going in and being like, yeah, you have a gas leak.
God, that's so funny. There's an episode of Monstrous Agonies that's also sort of the same thing. Like, it's a podcast that's like a supernatural advice podcast, and someone's like, oh my god, like, the house I'm in is haunted. Like, I've done everything. I've given it all the offerings that it asked for, and it's still doing shit. And then, like, the like, host is like, you have a fucking gas leak.
It was so funny because it's like, oh, like, sometimes a door opens and then closes and we don't know why. And then he just goes in there and goes like, yeah, this door is installed incorrectly and it will open unprompted because the hinges are out of order. And it's like, cool. Great. And then after that, they bring in a psychic to be like, oh, I hear a spirit.
So real. Oh, also I looked it up. I think it's Lindsay Ellis or Lindsay whatever who's the Raylo, and Jenny Nicholson is friends with her, so that's how I got it mixed up. Kate sees, like, the creepy girl from earlier standing at the window, and she startles, but then she disappears. And the mom says something about how, like, it's gonna be great here, Kate. It really is. Which, you know, starts the thread where, like, you don't know exactly what happened in this family's past, but they've come here to escape something. I thought that Kate was just, like, bullied at her old school or something, but no, that's something else that happened. And then we go inside the house to later in the night. And we start with the son, Danny. He's playing video games in the dark. And then the door...
He's playing it from a DS,
yes.
which, you know, I love. Yes. Every time there's a DS in Supernatural, I feel extreme happiness and joy.
Good. So the door, like, creaks open. And then there's, like, a dirty baseball that, like, rolls in. And, like, this kid is not young enough to be falling for this shit. He's like... oh my god, hi, I'm Danny. It's okay, you can come out. Let's play ball together. Like, girl, have you never seen a horror movie? Were you never taught stranger danger? What do you think is happening?
Yeah. He was like, I've never seen The Shining. You can come in. Are there even ghosts in The Shining?
I don't know.
I think that's just him going insane. Like, I think that's the
that's
thing,
just,
right?
I think it's a psychological whatever thing of that guy being mean to his wife. We don't see the girl. We just see, like, darkness, and, like, he, like, rolls the ball back, and then, like, she throws it at him. They start playing catch. Yeah. And you know what? That
overhand
is kind
throw.
of fun.
I respect that.
Yeah. That is kind of fun. Except that this kid is not fucking old enough to be, not fucking young enough to be falling for this shit. What the fuck? We cut to the next morning.
Is it the next morning? It's still night.
Oh, is it? Okay, it's still night. Sorry, I think I got it mixed up with a different. Okay,
I think this all happens in one day.
Yeah. I'll just do...
which is... there's a scene later that is very confusing because it's so obvious that they filmed it during the day. but like you're supposed to think it's night, and it
Which
is the
scene?
oddest fucking thing. The one where they're like getting Danny out of the hole.
Oh.
That show is supposed to be night, because like outside it's night, but it's so obvious that they filmed it during the day.
Well, maybe
So it's
like the sun had started rising, or
No,
was it
because,
not
like-
that kind of light?
No, because like outside we the mother and the daughter are like in the shed, and it's complete darkness.
True.
And like they go out later, and it's still complete darkness. So the fact that the sun is coming up in this scene it's not.
Yeah, got it. So then we have a brief scene with like the parents, and the mom's just like basically like looking up like the WikiHow on how to start a farm.
I respect that.
Yeah.
She said, "I'm a procrastinator, and this
Yeah.
is what we're gonna do." At some point, she goes like, she's like reciting very, very, very basic plant growing facts, like zucchini will grow, but the soil is too acidic for beets.
Yeah.
And then she looks up and goes, "Do you
Do you
understand any of
understand?
this?"
Yeah, like, girl, what's not to understand?
The soil is too acidic for beets. I wonder what that means.
What's acid? I never took chemistry.
Yeah, I mean, will zucchini grow or not grow? I don't know.
It's a mystery. I'm gonna fail the GRE so bad.
Yeah.
Sorry, okay, for the audience, I overslept our recording time, and it's because I was doing GRE practice problems last night. Horrible. Anyway.
Hell yeah.
So the dad's like inspecting cabinets, and it smells bad, like dead animals or some shit. Which, is that because like behind the walls it's all the dead animals? Is that the implication?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I was so looking forward to him because it's a 2-door cabinet and he opens one door, and a part of me was like, is he gonna open the other door and then find
it's
like
the
a dead raccoon there? And like I think that would be the funniest fucking thing,
It
but alas,
would
they never
be.
opened the second door. Yeah.
Yeah, sad. I mean, he did in the footage, but then they cut it out to show Sam going up the stairs.
So that's Sam going up the stairs. Yeah.
So, you know, like, he's not really listening to her, and she's like, Brian, what are we doing? Like, we, like, can't farm, what the fuck? And he's like, no, like, everything's gonna be good. I promise that we're gonna be happy. And she says, if we're not, and he says, we will be. We have to be. I don't think your marriage counselor did a good job.
Your marriage counselor was like, I want to get rid of these people. I'll send them to buttfuck nowhere. That'll get rid of them.
Yeah. And then she says something about how I can't put the kids through another year like the last. So, you know, more intrigue, more mystery.
Anyway, Sam and Dean are outside the house. They pull up. They see that the family is, in fact, residing in their house. And Dean goes, so what now? And Sam says, we could tell them the truth. And Dean goes, really? And Sam goes, no, not really. I love this conversation.
What they do, like, immediately afterwards.
It is truly, you know, like, they're like, oh, we should do it. But, like, nah. And, like, the reasons for doing it and the reasons for not doing it in their head are both equally stupid.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know what the fuck these guys are on. Like, we shouldn't tell them to keep them safe. Like, I don't find it.
Well, I think we shouldn't tell them because they won't believe us, and then it'll be less likely that they'll allow us to stick around.
Yeah, but they already think you guys are fakes because, you know, you're not actually helping.
I guess they don't know yet that they figured out that there was no asbestos. Like, it's possible that they just think that
Just
family
move
does not
in.
care about asbestos. Asbestos? What's that? She doesn't know what asbestos is. She doesn't know what acidic soil means.
Yeah. Ted the uncle. Okay. Maybe the uncle is only supposed to be here for a bit just to help them move.
Move in, yeah.
And that's why there's not a room for him.
That's true.
Anyway, he's walking around, fixing some stuff up, and then he, like, sees something on the wall, and then he calls the couple, and they come in, and somebody has written, "Go," in crayon.
Okay,
in
did
red,
you
so it's like,
also
ooh.
think that this was Sam and Dean? Because it happened right after they're like, oh, we should tell them, no, we need a new method to get them out. And then it cuts to this, right?
I just scared the crap out of them with crayons. I respect that. They start calling on the little kid, and, Danny goes down, and then he says, "Oh, I didn't do it. It's the girl in the walls. She wants you to go and me to stay. Because she likes me, but she hates grown-ups, so you guys have to leave."
How old do they think this kid is supposed to be? Like, I can see this kid, and this kid is like 12 or whatever the fuck. But how old is he supposed to be in the show? Like 5? Like, I'd believe a 5-year-old could say that,
5.
But no one older than 5.
Definitely not 5. Maybe 9? Like, I think that's the age we're supposed to infer.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
There's a girl on the walls, and she's grimy and eats rats, and she hates grown-ups and wants you to leave, and wrote "go" on the wall in crayon, and I'm her friend, and I like her, and this is a normal thing.
I don't know. Anyway, he goes, they, make him go to his room, and while he was walking up the stairs, he goes, "If Andy were here, he'd believe me," which, ooh, mystery person. But,
Yep.
This was interesting to me because this felt like the plot of, what's that episode?
301?
The one with the girls and the, haunted mansion
Playthings?
dolls. Yeah, that one, I think. What season is that?
2?
It's season 2. Yeah, it reminded me of that, which did make me feel like this episode was just a combination of the two episodes I've already mentioned. So, Playthings and No Exit.
Oh, I know.
And The Benders. So,
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like they're rehashing old sentiments. Rehashing old ideas, but I like this because it has a more personal touch. Like, these people are people, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what it reminded me of was, Tamara and Isaac's thing in 301, where it was, dropping hints about how they got into hunting, and then eventually it's they had a child that was killed.
That died. Hell yeah. Our next scene is the teenage girl, Kate. She's lying in bed, and she is, caressing something on the floor. The dog. And she's talking to the dog also. She's saying, "Oh, it's okay. I hate it here too." And then the dog starts licking her. And then she goes, "Ew, gross. What's the matter with you?" It's a dog. I think a dog can lick you and it's fine.
Yeah, though, I mean, probably, this dog is not much of a licker.
Yeah, I guess. Anyway, she keeps on caressing the dog, and then the door opens, and it's the dog. I love this scene.
Sorry,
the dog comes in.
What is the... Okay, so, this little girl was, hiding under the bed, and Kate was stroking, her hair, and it ended up being the same texture as the dog's, and then she started licking her?
Not.
For what? Was she pretending to be a dog? Was she I want to eat this girl and I need to check how she tastes? What is happening?
It's wild shit, honestly.
Also, you would be able to tell if it's, your dog's fur or, some random girl's, dirty hair.
I mean, also, she's supposed to smell really bad. So,
yeah.
I don't know. But I just love the scene because it's so ridiculous. It's so
really, okay.
It's so funny. Like,
Yeah, a
it's
lot of
amazing.
this episode is just like, we want to do like a fun horror trope, and we're just gonna like throw logic out of the window in order to do it. And that does make it entertaining, because I'm like, it is fun that it was the girl licking her, and that is something that would be scary. But also, like, I don't, just put a little thought into it. Make it seem to make sense a little bit, please.
I mean, a part of me was like, maybe it's the brother, because, like, he has shorter hair, as we see later when he dies. But, like, why would he have shorter hair?
Why would he have shorter hair? Who's reinforcing gender norms inside of the walls?
It's crazy what they do with his eyes. It's like, it's so bad it turns back into good. Anyway, Kate is obviously very distressed by this, and she starts screaming.
We cut to the downstairs, and the whole family has gathered, and, you know, she's freaking out, and she's like, Jesus Christ, like a ghost just, like, fucking licked me. And then Danny's like, oh my god, a ghost like the girl on the walls? And then, like, the parents are like, you guys are full of shit, stop it. And then Sam and Dean knock on the door, and then they go,
open.
You have a ghost.
Literally, Sam just goes, you have a ghost.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's wonderful.
Even though the last scene was them going, no, we can't tell them the truth. Like, what is that the logical leap in this
No,
episode?
this is what I'm talking about. Like, this episode is so... I think part of it is intentional. Like,
Okay.
it is intentionally funny.
Like, funny, yeah, okay.
Like, this is like a funny scene because they were like, oh, we shouldn't tell them. And then the next scene of them showing up is, you have a ghost. Like, I think that's like, maybe intentionally funny.
Guess,
And I think
feel
the
like
girl getting licked by the
Yeah.
girl was also funny. Like, I don't know. I think this episode is so funny.
It is funny, but I feel like they're just trying to do a regular horror movie. But I guess a lot of regular horror movies are sort of meant to be like shticky and funny sometimes too, so.
Yeah.
Dean's like, okay, like your family's in danger and you have to get out of the house fucking now because of the ghost. And then like all the lights go out. And then they hear the dog like barking from a distance, and then the dog is whimpering. And then the dog goes quiet. And they run out of the house towards the direction of the sounds. And then they see, written in blood, in the dog's blood, on the wall, the words, too late. Who was teaching her the ABCs inside the walls?
I love how they were like, these people are animals, they don't even talk, like, what? And
Like,
she literally just
she
wrote
can read
too late.
and write.
I respect that.
Right, so Dean's like, okay, we have to go, we have to head to the motel. They go over to the cars, and all the tires of the Impala and the moving truck and the family's car are slashed. And Sam
How did they drive out, like, later, like Sam and Dean?
There's like a scene of them installing new tires, on which actually, if they had, where did they come from? If they had new tires the whole time, why not just install them now? I mean, maybe in the morning they like walked to town and bought new tires, like from a store, and then they walked back. But, like, why can't they walk to town now, then?
It's crazy.
God, what the
Well, they can't because, like, they're gonna abandon this family to die.
Actually, it's possible that they had them, but then, like, they got taken. Like, the guns got taken, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Maybe,
sure.
Yeah.
Fine, Jeremy Carver, you get away with this one.
I mean, okay, first of all, how was she able to open the trunk?
Right, isn't it locked?
Like, all the guns are stolen. It's a hidden compartment. If this person is so animalistic
Yeah,
that she can't
and,
even
like,
think of
unsmart
anything.
or whatever.
Yeah, how's she able to figure out your hidden compartment? Like, I don't know, it's...
Actually, like, the
episode's
brother
fucking
is, like,
nuts.
really, really smart, and, like, he, like, is, like, he knows how to read, he did all the writing, and he knows everything. It's just that, like, we didn't learn that he was smart because he got killed so fast. Sam checks the trunk, and all the guns are gone, and he also says, so is the, and then, like, he pulls something out that, was it, like, the demon knife? What was it that was, oh, it was flashlights. Okay, I couldn't tell because Supernatural's lighting is terrible, and also I had really bad eyesight.
It's
yesterday.
funny, like, this person just did not get the flashlights. I don't know, it's just...
Yeah.
It is such a confusing...
Well, I guess, isn't
everything
the thing
about this
that,
episode.
like, it's like she's barely ever even seen
blinded
light.
by the lights, yeah.
So, like, she has no need
like,
for the flashlights, but,
did
like,
she see guns? Did she know what
Right.
guns are?
yeah, I don't know. Oh, she
They had
never
a
used
fucking-
them.
They had, like, fucking, like, those, like, things you throw, and they're blades in that car. They had a flamethrower. Like...
She was like, I'm gonna stick with my one knife.
Yeah. Anyway, like, at some point, like, Brian, like, the husband, comes back, and he goes like, yeah, the truck's no good, because both tires are slashed. I'm thinking, there are 4 tires in the truck. Or is he saying that both the truck and the
I
car's
think that's
tires
what
are
he means by
slashed?
both, but it does sound like there were only 2 tires between the truck and our personal car. Oh, and obviously
so
Dean's very
bad.
upset because, oh no, it's the Impala, and he's like, what kind of ghost messes with a man's wheels? Blah, blah, blah. Kate sees the girl, like, running off in the woods, and Dean's like, what's a ghost doing outside? So, you know, they're leading up to the it wasn't a ghost at all sort of thing. And Dean's like, okay, actually, we all have to go back into the house that I spent so long convincing you to get out of. Because, like, this ghost can go anywhere, and she's hunting us for sport, so we have to be in a place with better defenses, whatever.
Anyway, so they go inside, and Dean sets up a salt circle for everyone, and Brian starts, you know, being like, oh, we're gonna go, I don't want to be here, but Dean is being more forceful while Sam is doing the whole, like, he's calling this guy sir, and he's like, this is what we do, like, trust us. And the kid shows a little bit of interest, calls them Scooby-Doo, which is fine. And Sam and Dean show the pictures to the kids.
Oh yeah, the housekeeper gave photos of the daughter and the wife. Did we mention that?
Yeah.
I forgot. Okay.
I think we didn't mention this specifically what pictures she gave, but yeah. The both kids say that the daughter is the girl in the walls. And Sam and Dean speculated, like, oh, maybe she did not kill herself, and, you know, oh, no. They speculate that she wasn't cremated, or, like, something in the house has her spirit or whatever. Sam suggests going to the attic, and then, you know, Dean is supposed to stay there and take care of the people. Which, you know, in terms of division of labor, who would you assign? If you were the team leader here, right? Who would you assign to be the caretaker of the people? And who would you assign to go to the attic?
I mean, this family is in emotional distress, so I feel like Sam at least tries to be accommodating of that.
No, exactly. This is what I was thinking. Like, send Dean to the attic. Like, I don't know. At least he doesn't have a gun.
Yeah, but
He
that
can
doesn't
actively
stop
point
him.
at the people. It doesn't stop him. Well, anyway, they go, and Ted, the uncle, is like, oh, whatever, I'm gonna fucking get out of here. And Dean corners him to the wall, tells him, like, I've got a gun, so get back inside that circle before I gave you a third hole.
Okay, yeah, no. Okay, what are the... Okay, like, anus and mouth? Are those the two?
I don't know.
Like, there's a lot of holes in the human body. There are nostrils and, like, ears.
Eyes.
Yeah. Or maybe Ted
Yeah.
is trans.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe the pee hole is,
Yeah.
the
Sure.
second hole, and then the gunshot is the third hole.
Yeah.
So I guess
this
if
is
you have a
so...
female anatomy of,
Yeah.
they're just gonna give you your fourth hole. I respect that.
Sure. This is very, like, maybe they like the other white meat of him.
Exactly.
Also, Ted talks exactly like Dean. He says, it's just some backwoods hillbilly bitch, and I'm not about to sit around here waiting for her to go all deliverance on my ass. And
They should have kissed. They should have kissed, for real.
He also turns out to be right, so that's egg on Dean's face.
Sam calls Dean out on not having a gun, but Dean's like,
Okay,
yeah, I
it's
don't
so
give a
funny
shit.
how they're whispering, and, like, supposedly no one in the family's gonna hear this, but they're in a salt circle with a diameter of 6 feet max.
Yeah, exactly. And Dean says, I'm not letting anyone die tonight. Which starts a theme in this episode.
Yeah.
That, like, he doesn't want anyone to die.
Yeah, because he feels so guilty about hell, so he needs to save everyone, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. I mean, I get what they're trying to do, but, like, where was this in the earlier episodes?
Yeah, he remembers being in hell the whole time. Like, why is he only doing this now that Sam knows about it? Like, now it just seems like he's trying to, like, look good for, like, Sam, not, like, for, like, actual guilt.
Yeah, exactly. They start asking about the salt until suddenly the girl comes in and opens the door
Yeah.
and, like, slowly starts creeping up to them. And all I could think about is, they didn't lock the fucking door?
Well, they think she's a
Jesus
ghost.
Christ,
Ghosts
man.
can pass through walls or whatever, right?
Yeah, but, like, still lock the door. Come on. Dean is just there being like, she can't come in the circle, don't you guys worry about it. And the girl just keeps on walking and walking.
Yeah.
She reveals a knife, and then she steps over the line.
Yep.
Hell yeah! And
Hell
Kate
yeah.
goes like, I thought ghosts can't cross the circle. And Dean's like, yep, not a ghost.
Uh-huh.
And Dad is like, shoot her. And Dean was like, I don't have it. And he just tells them to start moving. And then Dean, is fighting for his life until Sam comes in, shines a flashlight on her face, which, hurts her eyes, and she starts running.
Photosensitive gang rise up.
Yeah.
We cut to a little bit later. They've all left the house. They're all outside. So apparently the whole family, when this happened, they all ran into the woods to hide and shit. Dean's like, I'm telling you, man, humans. Which, like, starts a thing in this episode where it's Dean's like, humans are capable of so many horrible things. I never find it interesting when Supernatural does humans are the real monsters. Because whenever they do humans are the real monsters, which is like this and the Benders.
It's always some, like, yeah.
Yeah, it's always like, oh, these are like some, like Southerners who are poor and they're just, like, on the edge of society, like, being, like, serial killers, blah, 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 blah. Like, they never do it about,
and
like corporate greed or,
actual
like,
people,
anything
yeah.
that, like, is actually, like, common and happens.
Even when they do corporate greed,
It's
those
Dick
are
Roman.
Leviathans.
Yeah.
It's literally Vic Roman. Also, like, it is quite irritating in this episode specifically, where they keep on referring to those people as, like, they're barely human.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get into it the first time Sam mentions it, but that really, like, pissed me off. Because, like, what's the point of doing this episode then?
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
I don't know.
I think Sam's supposed to be considered wrong. But
No.
Yeah. No?
No, I don't think so.
Really?
Because like the thesis of the end is like Dean going, yeah, they're barely human, but they're still better than me.
That's
like,
true.
The fact that they don't know what they're doing makes me worse because I knew what I was doing.
That's true. Also, they keep bringing up that they're in the countryside, which, like, I think is a fucking annoying as well.
It's the focal point of this episode. Yeah, this episode's fucking nuts.
Yeah, so they're talking, and Dean's like, hey, maybe it's like the daughter Rebecca, and instead of hanging herself, she just went to live in the walls. And Sam's like, well, no, but she'd have to be, like, 50 now. Okay, wait, if she has to be 50 now, and she killed herself
20 years ago.
When she was, like, 20... Okay, so these... Okay, I keep calling them kids, but they're, like, 20. They're, like, young adults.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't they keep calling them kids in this episode? Well, it's because she says because, like, she hates grown-ups. Like, that implies to me that, like, that's a child. But, like, she's, like, 20 or whatever.
Yeah.
Sam says that he found Rebecca's diary in the attic, but nothing else. And, you know, they talk about how they have to, like, hold her off, keep the family safe. So Brian is calling the family out to go, and Susan and Ted and Kate, I guess, show up, but they can't find Danny. They start, like, yelling and screaming because they don't know where he is. So their former plan of, like, them all walking to town as Sam and Dean stay here and kill these people is now nil, whatever. You know, Dean decides that Kate and Susan should hide in the shed because the windows are boarded up and it only has one door, so it's the most defensible position. Sam and Dean are gonna work with Brian and Ted to find Danny. Why? I mean, misogyny. Anyway, so Dean and Ted are looking around inside. Also, Ted finds a knife, so they've got one weapon. Dean finds, like, a board in the wall that's loose, and he's able to crawl inside. It smells really bad. As they go further inside, there's, like, a little hole in the floor, and Dean decides that he's gonna go in. Though, okay, if they're just looking for Danny, can't he just shine his flashlight down there and see if he's there? Dean doesn't have to go in the hole. Like, he can just yell Danny's name and then sweep a flashlight around.
I mean, he wants to go into the hole. Yeah.
Yeah, he really wants to enter that hole.
I mean, there's a gaping hole inside of him.
Yeah, fucking hell. What does Bobby say? Don't go after Dick because it fills the hole. Go after Dick because it... Like, what does he say?
The right thing. I think... Go after the right... I don't fucking know, but it's,
well,
you know...
We'll find out
he
in,
also
like,
says it this episode.
2 years or
he
whatever.
He says, like, there's a hole...
He does say that.
I respect that. They're obsessed with holes in this episode.
Doesn't he have a conversation with Gordon about a similar thing? Where, like, killing monsters fills a hole in him or something? Or is that from something else? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Poor Dean. He has so many holes. And Cass isn't even in this episode. So he goes down, and it's like a room with like flies buzzing around, and there's like dead rats, the dead dog in there. And he calls it her kitchen. Also, like, there's like art on one wall, like where there's like two stick figures holding hands. Okay, who the fuck is enforcing gender norms down here? Because one of them is like a girl symbol with like a triangle dress on it or whatever.
Yeah.
Where did she learn that?
She's wearing a white nightgown.
Shit, she is. Yeah, it's just very dirty now.
Like, what was the guy wearing?
I don't know. Like, it was
normal
a fight scene.
guy.
It was very hard for me to see anything. Actually, okay, how did she have clothes that fit her? Like, in addition to like throwing like food down there, like her dad/granddad was also like making her new clothes each year.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
This episode is so fucking stupid.
Okay, wait, I couldn't tell. I thought that... Were the two stick figures, like, a girl and a boy?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's her and her brother, so it's, like, foreshadowing. Yeah. That's cute. And then Ted hears, like, creaking behind him. And he turns around, and the girl is there. And she stabs him to death. And the way that it is revealed that he dies is, like, we're back to Dean. And then, like, Ted, like, falls down perfectly so that his head falls through the hole. Which is fun. I did like that.
Anyway, Sam and the husband are in the shed together with the two women. And they're talking about how, you know, how we should go in there. And Sam's like, no, let's wait for them. And then Dean knocks, enters, and it's just him. And they ask, did you get Danny? And he goes, no. And Susan goes, well, where's Ted? And Dean goes, he's outside. And Susan goes, well, why won't he come inside? And Dean just goes, I had to carry him out. I'm sorry.
I'm so annoyed every time they refuse to be straight up about a death notification. Like, he's outside. Like, what is wrong with you? Just tell people. And also, like, how, like, they didn't even tell Anna that her parents were dead. That Sam was just like, I'm sorry. And then, like, she has to come to the conclusion by herself. Which, like, I don't think I would come to that conclusion by myself. I would be like, oh, are they, like, very badly injured or something? You know what I mean? Like, it's rude of them to not just tell people the truth because they feel
like
awkward about it.
Like, the confirmation, yeah.
Like, yeah, in Disco Elysium, there's a scene where you have to give a death notification, and your skills tell you very explicitly you have to use the word dead. Like, that is the only way to, like, properly go about it, and I agree. Sam and Dean are so annoying. So annoying.
Anyway, he explains what happened, and everybody starts freaking out. Dean is very apologetic. He's very sad. Dean fucks off? I don't know. Sam is reading the diary, and the husband and wife are talking to each other. Well, the husband is saying, we'll find our son, it's okay. And Susan is saying, like, oh, the kid is dead. I mean, or my brother is dead, so, you know, our son must also be dead. And Brian just goes like, no, our kid is alive. And they just go, like, back and forth, like, he's alive. No, he isn't. He's alive. No, he isn't. And then finally he just goes, the girl in the wall likes him. She said he could stay. So it's okay. He's gonna be alive. And Susan just goes, I don't understand. We're good people. We're a good family. Why is this happening to us?
Which I found really annoying, but I also understand that she is in a situation.
Yeah. And the husband says, what happened to Andy happened. You know, I cannot change that, but Danny will find him and we're gonna be okay. And then he goes, you, me, the kids, we're gonna be fine. And it's like, her brother just died.
Yeah.
And they do not even acknowledge this.
They don't care.
They don't give a shit about this guy. And it's just, I don't know, a part of me was actually very like, like, there's an uncle in this family, because I understand that in the United States that's not common for, like, specifically, like, white families.
Wait, what do you mean?
I've mentioned this before in the podcast. Like, here, everyone's in the family is just in the family. Like, it's very common for a family to have, like, an aunt or an uncle just tossed in there, a grandma, a grandpa. Like, we don't really, like, we have the concept of a nuclear family, but it's, you know, like, it's more than that. Like, it's extended. So, like, having an uncle here, I thought was interesting. And I was like, oh, what are they gonna do with it? Nothing. And then basically, they just do this thing in the show where it's like, oh, like, we got rid of the uncle, we got rid of the dog. But, like, those people are not necessary.
Yeah, because it's the
like,
nuclear
what's
family.
What's important is the nuclear family. And I was like, okay, well, it is an American show, I fucking guess.
It sure is an American show. Yeah. Now we're outside the farm, and okay, wait, was, like, Brian standing there alone and then Dean came up to him? Or were they standing there together?
I think they're both outside,
Okay,
which is
that's-
like such a stupid idea.
Yeah, why are you not all just in the fucking shed? Like,
They need space.
his brother-in-law
I need
just
space.
got murdered while he had Dean there for protection. And now he's like, I want to be
Yeah.
outside with only Dean for protection.
Nobody in this episode acts in any way that makes sense.
Yeah. So Dean's like, oh, is Andy your son? And Brian says he was the oldest son and he was killed in a car accident last year. And it was very bad for his marriage. Is literally what he says next. Oh my god. So
This episode is truly something.
yeah, and he says like the marriage counselor said that they should move here for fresh air and a fresh start. And he's like, oh yeah, because what could go wrong in the country? Which is like, whatever, dude. Stop being... Supernatural just fucking hates the country. Like, they're like, we're gonna set, like, Kansas is gonna be the home of our protagonists. And, like, we're gonna be, like,
But
so
they're not
big
country
on the...
people.
Yeah, but they're not
Yeah.
disgusting country people. They're from the Kansas suburbs. Okay, man. Dean's like, I'm getting your son back if it's the last godforsaken thing I do. And Brian's like, why do you care so much? Which
It's a
is,
very,
you know,
very prevalent question.
what you ask when one of your sons died last year and one of your other sons might be murdered right now by the girl who killed your dog. You go, oh my god, but you're such a hero. Why do you care so much? Please tell me more about your life, Dean.
It's just such an odd fucking... Anyway, Sam shows up and tells Dean that they gotta talk, so they go inside the house.
Leaving Brian alone to be murdered. Leaving the family alone to be murdered so they can have a private conversation about something that isn't even confidential.
Anyway, Sam finished reading the diary. And he assumes that the girl is Rebecca's daughter. Because she, in the journal, she talks constantly about being pregnant and being ashamed of being pregnant.
Dean is such a shithead about this.
He goes like, oh, whatever. Get over it. He says, rent Juno and get over it. And
He
then
knows
goes,
that she
"Wait,
killed herself. Like,
yeah, I don't fucking... He goes like, why did she kill herself? Like, after the baby. And Sam's like, oh, her dad, like, called her a dirty little whore. And, like, said that he was gonna lock the baby up. And Dean goes, why would he say that? Which is, I feel like an odd thing.
yeah, I mean, I don't... is it really true that men who grow up without sisters, like, don't know anything? Dean watches movies. Dean watches a lot of movies. Like...
Yeah, but he watches the kinds of movies that
with
are...
no women in them. Just cowboys.
Yeah.
Right, like, I don't know, like, does he not know about, like, slut-shaming and how, like, having a baby out of wedlock, even if it's not the result of your dad raping you, is, like, considered shameful to, like, a lot of people? He grew up in Kansas.
I don't know, the whole thing of, like, Sam would say nothing, and that's automatically means that, like, oh, his dad, or her dad raped her. And it's like...
Right, no, I just... Like,
I don't know, this conversation doesn't make any sense.
right, like, she was
Like-
an unwed mother. Like, that's, like, considered very taboo in a lot of people's families.
Yeah, and I don't know, the question of, like, why would he say that feels very much like, what did she do for to deserve, like, this, like, a horrible thing thrust upon her? And, like, I think that's why it made me, like, feel so uncomfortable. Because,
Yeah.
like, why would he say that? Well, because he's an asshole? I don't fucking know. But, like, now it becomes, like, like, did she, like, what, did something happen for him to say that? And it's like, yeah. And it's, I don't know. It's just, like, this episode is just so weirdly written. It's so weirdly written. Jeremy Carver, what is up with you?
I don't know.
Anyway, they conclude that the father raped the daughter. And then, you know,
Dean cracks 2 different jokes about this. What the fuck?
Yeah. Sam starts this thing where he calls the man a monster, right?
Right.
Which, I mean, yeah, but also, like, the way they use it here and for the rest of the episode, like, calling someone, like, an animal or a monster is not a cry against their values or their morals or their actions, you know? It's basically going like, yeah, I mean, what can you do? Monster. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe it's more applicable to the later uses of Sam, like, basically going like, oh, monster, or like, animal, or like, barely human. But every time he says it, it has this air of, it becomes less like, oh, I'm like, I'm telling you off for being a horrible person. It becomes more of, like, excusing in a way.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, yeah, these people are horrible. What do you expect? Like, that's kind of the vibe. Which is annoying and is horrible. And, I mean, it's, like, in my personal life, that's something I try to not do.
Yeah.
Like, when people do terrible things, I do firmly remind myself, like, these are people. And, like, that is, like, actually worse. Like, that makes it worse.
Yeah.
Because, like, when you go, like, oh, like, those people are monsters, or those people are horrible in a way that is different from a horrible that I can do, or, like,
Right.
a horrible that a normal person can do. It, like, almost excuses the behavior.
Yeah.
It's the same deal with, like, corporations. Like, seeing corporations as, like, an entity that is indestructible.
Right.
Removes the fact that those are built and made up of people. And, like, that makes it worse. And you should be, like, angrier about the fact that, like, there are people behind this.
Yeah.
And, like, actually thinking about them less as people and more as, like, just entities of evil that don't think as complexly as you or whatever.
Yeah.
Is actually more, you know, it's more beneficial for them, for you to
That's
think
true.
of them that way.
That is true.
And so, like, yeah, like, I mean, that's where my train of thought, like, went. And, like, yeah, it is a bit far off from this specific line, but I just don't like it. I don't like it when people call other people monsters.
I agree. Also, there's a scene in Rising Sun Blues, which is the Bad Moon Rising season 2 thing, which is, like, the author's version of Heart. And, Sam's, like, basically, like, telling, like, Maddie, like, hey, so yeah, you're a werewolf, and, like, I do have to do something about that. And she's like, what the fuck? Like, the guys I killed were, like, abusive and shitty. And Sam goes, yeah, I know. Like, look, he deserved it, okay? He was a monster, but... And then Maddie says, no, he wasn't. He was human, and I'm not going to kill the monster that saved me. Anyway, so yeah, that seems slightly relevant to this.
Anyway, Dean, again, as Crystal said, makes a joke about how this is like a story from an Austrian headline.
So, this is a Freud joke, which implies that
Is it a Freud joke?
Yeah, I think that's what he means, yeah. Which is so terrible.
Is it not like, what's the name of that family that's, like, completely fucking inbred?
Oh, the Habsburgs or whatever?
Habsburgs. Is it not the Habsburgs joke?
It's possible? Yeah, the Habsburgs were Austrian, but, like, so was Freud. So I don't know what
I think it's
he
a
was
Habsburg
referring.
joke.
Okay.
I mean, it's
hope
probably
so.
on the fucking, like, SPN wiki, but, you know, I'm not gonna look.
I'll check. Okay, so what the Super Wiki says is that it's neither of what the things that we said. There was a case in 2008, so it would have been, like, right around the time this episode aired, of a guy in Austria who, like, held his daughter captive in a cellar for 24 years and raped her. So
Jesus Christ.
That's a bad thing to make a joke reference about, Dean.
Anyway, so she has been locked up and then like gets out and kills the guy from the scene earlier. Dean goes like, well, I can't say I blame her. And Sam goes, I'm sure her life was hell, Dean. It doesn't mean she gets a free pass for murder. Honestly, I think she can do whatever the fuck she wants.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, definitely killing, like, the guy from the intro, definitely, like, that's fine. Currently, like,
yeah.
It's not great, but, like, I get it. We're saying this right after you said that you hate when people excuse people's actions by calling them monsters.
No. I mean, I think I've delivered that with enough levity for people to conclude what I feel more strongly about, you know?
Good point. Also, I think she's a human who makes choices, and this is an okay choice for her to make.
And then the thing that Dean latches on in this sentence is the fact that Sam said her life was hell, and he goes, like, you know what hell's like. Yeah! Who wrote this episode? Jeremy. What are you doing, Jeremy?
Dean's literally a member of the people who were in hell community, and he's advocating for you all to use more sensitive language in your figurative language.
You know, Sam, like, tries to apologize, but Dean's like, oh, whatever. And then Sam's like, where do we find her? And Dean goes, well, kids gotta eat. And he kept her locked up, but he had to feed her, so I think I know where.
Okay, like...
Do they mean, like, where?
I don't
the
know.
Basement?
Was it the dumbwaiter? Like, I couldn't tell where they went.
No, it says here that they went to the basement, but they busted open the door. They busted open a wall.
I don't... Yeah.
Like, why is there a basement inside the wall?
I don't know. I guess...
Isn't a basement, like... I don't know.
Like, accessible?
This isn't, like, the tornado area, right? So everybody has a basement.
I think so, yeah.
So it's normal to assume that there is a basement. But it's not normal to break down a wall to get there.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it...
And it's not like when...
be hidden in a way, or else the realtors would have found her. But, like...
Yeah, but, like, it's so stupid.
Did he,
like,
seal up the... Well, okay, he probably sealed up the basement or something, right? Like...
But then how did he give her food?
The dumbwaiter? But then, like... The dumbwaiter was also sealed up. But also, like... I don't... Okay, wait, is the implication... Like, right now she's eating dead rats. Is the implication that like, she had regular food until recently after
and
she
then
killed him,
yeah.
and then she had to, like, eat dead rats?
I don't know. I mean,
that has to be the case, because or else she would have died of scurvy by now.
I mean, I think she would have died of other things, too.
Yeah, I mean, rats often carry disease and stuff. And also,
that's true.
It's cold in the winter.
She doesn't get vitamin D.
She doesn't get
know.
any vitamin D. It's just, I know humans can survive in, like, horrible circumstances.
Extreme conditions, yeah.
So, like, yeah,
for like 20
okay.
years. I don't know.
But, like, starting from being a baby, also.
Yeah! How did he give her milk? She can't process water. I don't know.
I don't fucking
anyway,
know.
And we go to the basement, and Danny, the kid, is there, and, you know, he's screaming, and then he sees the girl come in. Also, this is filmed in, like, dark,
and there's,
what
like,
do you call that?
Green filter?
Yeah, what's that called? Like night vision?
Night vision, something like that.
And then, you know, she comes through the wall, and she holds up, like, a rat, and then, like, she, like, tries to offer him the rat, I think.
His, like, he's gagged. He can't eat anything.
Yeah. he's tied up. He can't hold the rat. And then she just looks at him and then breaks the rat's neck and then she bites into it. Are human feet even made for this kind of carnivorism?
I don't know. I feel like rats don't have, like, very, like, thick skin or anything, though, right?
You'll be surprised.
Okay. So, okay. So the transcript does say that they're busting a hole in the dumbwaiter shaft. So, but how was he giving her food if it was, like, boarded up there? Or did he stop giving them food at some point? Like, is that oh my god, no, it's impossible for you to be here because, like, maybe eventually he was like, actually, I don't want this anymore, and then he boarded up the dumbwaiter and expected them to starve to death?
Left her to die? Yeah.
That could be it, right?
Maybe.
I would love if this episode told us anything.
I'm so excited because I'm in the transcript right now and I'm scrolling down alongside our discussions.
And we're so close to the end.
For the end, when we see, like, deleted scene.
Wait, and, there's a deleted
I bet there's
scene?
None.
There's definitely
No. I don't think
scenes.
so. But if there is, I want that inside. I am so curious about what they decided to delete to accommodate Sam's walk up the stairs.
Yeah, real and true. They, like, hammer into the kitchen wall where the dumbwaiter shaft is until there's a hole.
They do this thing where, like, Brian is there, like, the father is there, and he's like, I'm gonna go down, and Tina's like, no, I'm gonna go down. I promised that I would save him, and I will.
Yeah.
And then he just goes down, and it's so ridiculous.
Yeah. It's stupid.
I think, like, it's realistic for Dean to be like, I'll do it. But he wouldn't do this, like, entire speech about, like, I said what I said, and I said I'll save him, so let me save him. You know, I think he'll just be like, no, I'll do it. And I just jump in. Like, you know, it's just... everything here on out just feels so performative. Because he wasn't like this throughout the rest of season 4.
Yeah, he wasn't, like,
it's annoying.
At all. Like, we spent basically every episode criticizing him for being, like, sarcastic or untruthful about, like, how he wants to save people. You're telling me that he had the same mindset during Damn Right I Wanted to Save Some Naked Women? I guess the explanation, the charitable explanation, is that he was in denial about that stuff and trying not to think about it, and now that he's told Sam, it feels more real to him. So now he starts, like, needing to, like, redeem himself or whatever. I don't think people can be that good at denial. He spent longer there than, like, his natural lifespan on Earth. Like, that's pretty hard to tamp down. Okay, and then after Dean goes in, Sam's like, oh, by the way, are there any, like, curtains around? Because we need rope. They don't even do this beforehand.
They're like, no, I don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
So, Dean goes downstairs. Okay, there's, like, a wooden cross and a rosary in there. Which, what does that mean? Did his dad toss that? Yeah, there was a wooden cross on the floor. I noticed. Like, did the dad toss one in? He's like... I need this baby to be Christian. And also there's, like, guns and stuff that the stolen ones littered across the floor, so Dean is able to get one. Also, we cut between, like, Dean and the shed because, you know, Kate and Susan are in the shed, and then, like, the window gets busted in, and the girl shows up and starts trying to attack them. In the basement, Dean finds Danny tied up. He, like, frees Danny and is like, come on, let's go. And then Danny goes, hurry, he's coming back. And Dean goes, he? And Danny goes, her brother. Oh, God. Okay, we've already spent, like, 20 minutes talking about how fucking stupid this twist is. But have we considered that this twist is fucking stupid? Oh my God.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, it's It's so stupid.
It's just for this one moment of Dean going like,
It
he?
is. It's also so funny because, like, occasionally I would do this thing where I would translate Supernatural in my head. And sometimes it's, like, really nice because, like, when Sam and Dean are talking and then they're amping up the whole, like, big brother, little brother thing, and I think of Sam calling Dean Kuya, I think, oh my god, like, now that's so, like, I'm gonna cry.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this scene and I was like, yeah, we don't have gendered pronouns in Filipino, so this would have just passed us by. And there is, I've been saying this, there is a Filipino dub of Supernatural, Tagalog dub specifically.
Right.
And I have been looking for it. I have no access to it. I don't know where I can find it. I do want to find it. So if anyone has a link, we've been saying this in season 1, but
That's
if you
true.
know anyone who can give me access to this, I would want it. But this one, like, they I think they did until season 7, so they definitely dubbed this episode, right?
Right.
And I was
So
thinking,
how
how
do
would
they
they have
do it?
dubbed this? I have no idea.
I guess, like, Danny would be like, hurry, the man is coming back.
Yeah, that's true. And then, like, yung kapatid niya, I don't know, it's so sweet. It's such a pointless twist. Cause, like, it could have, like, it would have made more sense if it was also a sister. Like, if it was also a girl. Cause, like, twins generally work that way.
What? No,
I mean, they're, like, no, identical twins, at least.
Oh,
work
well,
that
yeah,
way.
they have to be fraternal.
And the thing about this is it would have been a lot more interesting if there's like two of her, you know?
Right, yeah. And
like,
they're like, how is she in two
that would
places at once?
Yeah, and that would have amped up the whole ghost thing. Like, oh, she must be a ghost because she was here and now she's there, you know?
Right,
like,
yeah.
But they were like, no, let's reveal a brother.
But if it was like identical
at the 40th
twins,
minute or
would I
whatever.
not be calling it corny like right now?
I mean, who give a shit? It's already corny as hell. This episode is so bad, it's good. And I feel like having a twin ghost, not ghosts, but actual people who want to kill you situation would be hilarious. And would be, you know, even cornier.
And then there's like, the brother starts coming out and attacking Dean.
He has short hair.
What?
He has short hair.
He does have short hair. I don't know what clothes he's wearing. Do you want to do a redo of last of 409 where we go on Home of the Nutty and try to see? Yeah, no, sorry. It is not even loading. No, but I really want to check now.
Me specifically. I mean, does he even have short hair? What if I was just seeing things?
That's true. What if the true gender norms were in your brain and Supernatural is more enlightened than you are?
Yeah.
Wait. I can do this. I can find it.
11.
The album for the episode is loading. I believe in myself. This is just gonna become a segment of our podcast now. The one where we go to Home of the Nutty and wait for it to load.
Oh my god, it's here.
Oh, does he have short hair?
I can't see it properly because my darkness is in fact set to very low.
He does have short hair. It's a little longer than like a quote-unquote man's haircut. It's like shoulder length, a little more like, but...
Do you think they put him in a wig? Or this is just like the guy's hair?
And I can't tell if he's wearing pants. But he's definitely wearing a long-sleeved shirt and not like a nightgown. So like, this man was tossing food, he was tossing baby formula, he was tossing wooden crosses, and he was tossing increasing sizes of gendered clothing into that dumb waiter.
Okay, I don't think his hair is short, but it must be shorter than hers.
Yeah. It also looks a lot more washed than hers.
Yeah, he's got this guy can have like
he's
a
got
shampoo
conditioner
commercial
or whatever.
deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Palmolive, yeah. And also, like, yeah, not the nightgown inside. Dean looks ugly as fuck in this green cap.
He's fighting for his life. But yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so meanwhile in the shed, Susan's trying to defend with, like, a rake. They're, like, standing against a wall, like, farthest away from the window that got busted in, but then a knife stabs into the wall behind Kate's head. Sam drops down the curtains that made the rope for Danny to get up. They get him out. He's okay. Sam tells Brian to run off with Danny. He goes down. Dean eventually, like, shoots the brother to death. And then Sam comes down and gets him. And then the sister is, about to murder Susan and Kate. But then, like, she gets, like, pulled out of the shed by the ankle. And then there's, like, stabbing and screaming sounds outside. And then, like, they go outside, and Brian is there, and it's a whole reveal where it, like, slowly pans to him holding a bloody knife. So, like, it's, like, a big deal that he killed her. I don't think it's a big deal that he killed her. Like, that's what was gonna happen. I guess the idea is just, like, oh, this was a regular American dad, and now he's been forced to murder. But, like, I don't know. Like, the uncle was a regular American uncle, and he was ready to shoot her to death, like, within, like, 2 minutes. And then, everyone comes outside, they see the body, and they're all miserable. So we get part 1 of the epilogue. It's the next morning. Dean's replaced the tires and got all the guns back in the trunk. Dean's like, thanks for letting us leave early, like, before you guys call the police. And Brian says, why doesn't it surprise me you guys don't like the police? And then Sam says, it's sort of a mutual appreciation thing, really. What?
Yeah, what?
What does that
It's not
mean?
It is not some.
Like, you don't like police because you were, like, in jail and going to get, like, death penaltied last season. I mean, there's a Bad Moon Rising excerpt about this because, of course, there is. Can I read it?
Okay.
There's a strange kinship between hunters and cops. If pressed, neither would admit it. Hunters wield unregistered weapons, and they find under-the-table ways to stay fed, and they print themselves fake badges, and they break into morgues and mausoleums. They set fires, they drink too much, they dig up graves and kill things without a twinge of remorse. They linger on the ragged border of civilization and monstrosity, violent and hungry, always one wrong step from death or prison. Still, you would be surprised how many cops have some odd knowledge of monsters and the men that kill them. You would be surprised to know how many hunters left law enforcement because it wasn't enough for them. There's an implicit understanding between them, a knowledge that the only reason hunters aren't out of a job is because there's no cells made for werewolves or shapeshifters in federal correctional facilities. So, like, I get what Sam means, except that Supernatural doesn't really do anything that implies it. You're right that they do basically the same job, and that's, like, one of the criticisms of hunting in, like, the Supernatural fandom. The fact that you are just cops for monsters, and because you're cops for monsters, you feel like you have even more power to be judge, jury, and executioner. But, like, the show never plays into that at all, so it's weird for Sam to say. So, Brian and Susan both thank Sam and Dean asks, are you guys okay? Like an idiot. And Susan's like, no, we're the opposite of okay, but we're together. And then she, like, holds hands with her husband, which implies that all the marriage issues they were having earlier from their son dying are, like, now gone because of this. which I think is insane.
I feel like you go through this much shit. Just divorce. I don't know.
I get the whole,
that's
like,
such a mean thing to say.
The whole, like, you can't find someone else because no one else was there and they don't understand what you went through.
Yeah, but, like, I'm not... whatever. Personally, I don't necessarily agree with that kind of sentiment. But, you know, I am a fight... If I were to fight or flight, I will fly, so...
True.
Yeah, anyway, they fucking get out of there. They go to an overpass, which looks, I believe, exactly like the overpass they were at last episode.
Probably.
Did you notice that? It's crazy. So, they go out, and Sam hands Dean a burger. And Dean opens up the burger, and my first thought was, how can you eat after everything that you've seen today?
And he doesn't.
And you know what? Dean heard me, because he fucking looks at the burger and just wraps it back up. And Sam asks, are you okay? And Dean was like, you know, I felt for those sons of bitches back there. It's a life of torture. It turns you into something like that. Sam says, you were in hell, Dean. Maybe you did what you did there, but you're not them. They were barely human.
Jesus.
Dean goes, yeah, you're right. I wasn't like them. I was worse. They were animals, Sam.
Jesus.
Defending territory. Me, I did it for the sheer pleasure. And then he reveals that when he was torturing souls, he enjoyed it. Because it felt like retribution for all the years of pain that he experienced. He said he didn't care about who they put in front of him, as long as, like, he was able to inflict the pain that was inflicted on him. He goes, no matter how many people I save, I can't change that. I can't fill this hole. Not ever. This scene, I was laughing all throughout it. Like, I'm being fucking for real. I was just laughing so hard. Because... I don't know, it felt so like, damn, you did all that for this? For fucking this? Jesus Christ.
Wait, what is that and what is this in your sentence?
Like, this entire episode was done so that this reveal could happen.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know, it's just so stupid. A stupid episode, a stupid reveal. Everything's so stupid.
Fair,
I love it.
I think this reveal was better than the last episode reveal. Because it's like, yeah, okay, you tortured people in hell because, like, it was the way to get out of torture. Cool. Who cares? At least this is, like, a little bit, like, morally graying Dean, you know? Like...
Yeah, I guess.
Last episode was, like, a total cop-out. Like, you were in hell, it wasn't your fault at the end. At least this is something. And I think this, like, is very in character. But, like, the writers often don't make Dean in character in the way that he is in character in my mind. So at least they did this one. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, he does, like, he is a control freak sometimes, and also, like, he does feel resentment about the pain he's, like, felt in his life, and he does want to hold power over other people and cause them pain sometimes to feel better. Like, that's him. Yeah, you got it. Good job. At least you're willing to admit that.
Yeah.
Sam will just say anything, though. What was that?
Sam will literally say anything. Well, okay. Do you have anything more to say about this scene? Or should we do the exit stuff?
I figured you would have more thoughts about how Sam will say anything.
I have no thoughts about this episode other than complete and baffled amusement.
I just, like, okay, like, Sam... How does Sam justify the demon blood stuff to himself if, like, this is his attitude towards the world?
I don't think Jeremy Carver thought of that at all.
I mean, that's a good point.
I think they were like, Jeremy, we need you to do an episode where it's revealed that Dean tortured souls and he liked it. And he was like, okay.
I got it!
He did not. Like,
Yeah.
He did not watch a single other. He did not read a single other script from this episode, from this season.
Yeah. I mean, Sam, this isn't the first time Sam has said totally out of pocket shit. Remember at the end of Providence? He was like, well, some people are just born evil.
At least that makes sense, because that's like a belief system he has.
Right, at
Like,
least that
he
was
does
like,
believe that
okay,
he
you
was
fucking
born
Catholic. What is this
know
one?
what's wrong with this guy. Ugh.
I mean, it's also, like, he could be just a girl on the phone with her friend, where you go, yeah, literally, you did nothing wrong to your friend, even when they were the wrong one in the story.
Yeah.
Like, maybe he's just saying this shit to make Dean feel better. Like, maybe he doesn't even believe any of this.
Well, what did you think about this episode now that we have finished?
We recorded for 2 hours and 20 minutes? For what?
We have been recording for so long.
Just for us to say over and over again how stupid we think the episode is.
And it is so stupid. The thing is, this is like, I feel like this is like not typical Supernatural levels of stupid. I feel like Supernatural is constantly something, whether that is offensive or like distasteful or sometimes good, you know?
Yeah.
But it is often not this like just straight up like, what? Why? Like, that is the genuine emotion I felt watching this episode. So yeah.
Yeah. And also there's no deleted scenes.
There's no deleted scenes. Guys, I'm so sad. Well, I guess we have to do best line, worst line.
Oh my god.
I don't even remember a single line from this episode. You know what? I'm gonna start fresh and new and like from up top, and I'll say, it's impossible. It's my worst line. It's literally not impossible. It's completely possible. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Well, this, I think my worst line is the one you pointed out, where Dean goes like, why would he say that? For the reasons that you said. Like, I didn't even think, like, the only reasons I disliked it when I watched it was, like, does Dean not know about, like, slut-shaming culture? But, like, when you, like, pointed out that, like, it sort of implies that he thinks that she must have done something to deserve it, like, yeah, that's when it really, yeah, worst line.
Yeah, I guess my worst line is they're like the whole like she was barely human.
That too.
She's an animal.
Yeah, no, instead of having a best line, worst line, let's just both have 2 worst lines for this episode.
No, I think this episode deserves it. Yeah. What's your second worst line? I was racking my brain for a best line and I can't even think of any. So
okay, yeah, I think you've covered a lot of the
instead.
worst lines. I think the one criticism that we haven't covered yet is all the like, well, we're in the country, like she's a backwoods hillbilly bitch, like kind of shit. So one of those.
Hell yeah. Well, we have to do spreadsheets.
Yeah. Huh.
I don't think this episode particularly has anything.
Like, there's moments where I'm like, this is a bad thing and it did happen because the character's a woman, but, like, it's, like, not, it's, like, a different flavor. Like, I don't know if it's, like, truly misogyny.
Yeah.
Is it just a nothing episode?
It is a nothing episode, I think.
Yeah. Alright. Cool. I have no clue what the fuck the IMDb scores would be.
I am willing to bet that this is low.
And same.
I want to believe so bad that people saw this as stupidly as we did.
But also, like, fact that it was on the, like, scariest Supernatural episodes post that one time makes me... I don't know, like, before I came into this episode, like, because of that post, I sort of thought that this was, like,
It was gonna be scarier.
Yeah, that this was gonna be like a roadkill-esque episode. Where, like, it's, like, decent. And, like a little horror one-off that's, like, good. So, like, it's possible that people do view it that way because they're not as, like, smart and cool as we are. Also, like, I don't know. It's gotta be bad, right? It's gotta be bad. You say your number first.
I mean, I'll say 7.8.
Oh my god. Okay, I was gonna go with 8.1.
I'm betting low on this one.
I'm gonna
Okay.
go 8.1.
Let's see. Ooh, it's closer to me. It's a 7.9.
Interesting. Okay.
The first one is, this episode is so perfect and so movie-like.
I mean, it sure is like a movie that had no budget.
It's this score is 10 over 10. The twists in the story are so unexpected. You just do not see them coming.
Got it 5 minutes in. All of it. I got all of it 5 minutes in, except for who put who in the wall. But oh my! This is one of my most favorite episodes of Supernatural. Shows how simple human beings can turn into bloodthirsty killers. You're right. This happens to everyone. Everyone gets put in the wall by their dad/granddad. What a good message.
This was in 2015, so there were definitely better Supernatural episodes at this point.
God.
Oh.
You know that one, like, reviewer from Brazil who we never read anything from because they always just summarize the episode? I do just want to say that I'm like, it's very nice to see them week by week ending with, like, my vote is number, and then putting the title of the episode in Brazil at the end. Like, good for you for being here all the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is basically a summary though, so we just fast by it.
Uh-huh. Okay, the next one's 5 out of 10 and says no plausibility. Thank God.
One of the scariest episodes despite poor writing. I think that's an understatement.
Yeah. Yeah, they mentioned that it does make no sense for Danny to be so innocent that he doesn't think there's someone weird inside the walls.
This one points out the writing. Like, how are they literate enough to write the warnings?
Yeah.
One word was even appropriately capitalized.
This person enjoyed the surprise of the brother. Well, it did feel convenient for the writers. It was also unexpected in an episode full of surprises. The fact that it was unexpected is part of why you should dislike it. Okay, anyway. They keep mentioning the people under the stairs being... I don't know what that is, but supposedly it's similar to whatever.
I think it's like the Benders? I don't know.
No, like, it's like they capitalized the people under the stairs, like, by Wes Craven. Like, it's some kind of a... Let me see if it's like a short story or a movie or something. Not that it matters, like, at all. Okay, it's a horror comedy film from 1991.
Some of the dumbest crap in the entire run and it's in this episode.
God bless.
Maybe if the Winchesters didn't lose their common sense here, the final scene would play better. As it is insultingly covered subtext into that. This review is basically saying that, like, if you watch The Last Confession, you can basically infer what Dean is trying to say here.
I don't think
it's like,
so. Maybe I'm stupid.
Yeah, I don't know. And he's saying that, like, it's common sense and it's, like, insultingly covered subtext into text. I respect that.
Yeah, okay, so Anna Shade is back. Anna Shade does not have a rating, a number rating. But, okay, the review reads, first, an explanation for my exuberant and unfounded rating of 10 out of 10. I will be happy for any episode without angels, demons, Ruby, or Anna. Plus, haunted houses are just so much fun. And then you read further, and it says, all they did was they saw the preview for this episode and are excited to see it on January 10th. And then they said, I think it's going to be a fun, spooky episode with Sam and Dean in a haunted house. I'll probably change this comment when I actually see the episode, but who knows? Anna Shade never came back to change. But it doesn't say 10 out of 10. It has no rating.
Yeah.
Did Anna Shade come back and take out the 10 out of 10 because they were like, oh no, this was bad. But they didn't change their comment at all.
I thought that.
Oh my god, wait, Anna Shade didn't start during the first Anna episode. I'm looking at their history, and like, they were the one who titled the Bloodlust review shows just how deep the show goes. They've watched House MD. They reviewed Birthmarks and titled it Good to Have the Guys Back Together. I've always been a huge fan of House and Wilson as best friends. The two have a great dynamic. Anna Shade, call me. Let me study your brain. Who are you? Anyway, sorry, let's not get deep into... This isn't what this segment's about. Let's not get deep into insulting one specific person.
Yeah, this person points out that Sam and Dean are, like, hulked up men, and, like, this woman is, like, malnourished.
That's true.
And, like, how is it possible that, like, when they were doing hand-to-hand combat, like,
she
Dean
has
and the
a
lady,
knife.
like, why did he... Yeah, but he has, like, something too, right? He was defending himself.
He was just punching, I think, at the beginning.
Okay. I love it.
What?
They go,
What?
it was not the greatest episode. And you would think, like, saying, like, it's not the greatest episode, but it's okay. Like, that's what you expect, right? But they say, it's not the greatest episode, and it's a hiccup in the series as a whole. And they end it there.
Wait. Okay, did you... Okay, the one that mentions the malnourished thing, yeah, they also mentioned that, like, it just seems ableist to, like, portray these characters as terrifying monsters. And then it ends with, P.S. Has anyone else noticed that Supernatural is oddly misogynistic? And then P.P.S. Though in all fairness, the creators of Supernatural don't seem too fond of ethnic minorities or the handicapped either, though these elements are not quite so pronounced as the veiled misogyny. And yeah, I'm a dude writing this review. You know what? Good for you, dude. Like, it took you 4 seasons, but, like, I'm glad that this episode was finally, like, bad enough that, like, you finally had, like, a reckoning and realized, like...
No, this one says, like, I felt so sorry for the poor pitiable girl and her brother whom the makers of Supernatural wanted me to fear and hate. I think this is, like, a good point in that...
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if... Well, I don't know anything about feral... Is this considered feral children situation? I guess it is, because
sure, yeah.
they were not... Yeah, like, they... Like, since they were kids. But, like, you would expect... I feel like they would be more scared of you than you are of them. But I don't know. How would I know?
That's true. Isn't, like... I don't think that, like, she's killed anyone before, like, the guy in the opening. Yeah. So, like... I don't know, like... Yeah. I don't think that she has a history of being aggressive. You're right. And, like, the flashlight thing, yeah, it doesn't make more sense that she'd just be scared. Though, I mean, fear does sometimes, like, cause, like, aggressive behavior, so... I feel like, yeah, it's like...
No, but, like, the attacking the 2 women in the shed, that was obviously portrayed as, like, she was, like, grinning and stuff, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Wasted my time watching it. I I was so disappointed, but I waited until the end of the episode, hoping that it will have at least a nice ending.
Bad decision.
It literally is.
It literally is a bad decision.
Yeah. This episode was really fun. I really enjoyed dunking on this one. If I'm being fucking for real.
Yeah. I had a time. Was it good? Was it bad? Who knows? What's the next episode? Tell me Cass comes back or I'll die. I'll just die right here.
Okay, well, let's do the outro.
Okay.
That's it for this episode of Busty Asian Beauties. Next week we will be discussing Season 4, Episode 12. Chris Angel is a douchebag.
Oh, Ruby's in that one. Right?
Give us a rating or review wherever you get your podcasts. I don't think so.
What? Are you sure?
Ruby is here, but Cass is not.
Oh, well, that's fine, as long as one of them is there.
This is the episode with the chief.
Oh my god, no!
Haven't been had.
No! Dean hasn't been had until he's been had by the chief?
Yeah.
Oh my god, okay. I'm looking forward to whatever circumstance creates that scene.
Yeah.
Do I even say our Twitter in our outro anymore?
Sure.
Like, should we just cut it? Like, no? Okay. We're still on Twitter? Okay, fine.
I mean, we do have a Twitter.
I guess
it's
we do have one. We haven't deleted it yet. Okay. Follow us on social media.
If somebody DMs us, we receive an email about it. So, like,
Great.
and I check our emails.
Okay,
so,
right.
like,
And we
I'll
can't
see it.
delete Twitter because sometimes I do need to look at tweets and I do it through our account because I don't have one.
God. I wish, like, because we share our YouTube sometimes. Like, I think we both forget to log out of our...
Yeah, we forget to
like, we both forget
back
to change
our personal YouTubes.
Yeah.
So you see that
sometimes I see our YouTube history, and it is the funniest thing. And what I would give for me to see your Twitter history on our account.
I mean, I'll tell you,
alas.
it's just the Good Omens tag. Anyway.
I support that.
Follow us on social media. We are on Twitter at twitter.com/beautiespodcast and on Tumblr at bustyasianbeautiespod.tumblr.com. Our official tag is BABPOD, BABPOD. Thanks to everyone who's donated to our Ko-fi at ko-fi.com/bustyasianbeautiespod, and check out our merch at babpod.redbubble.com.
If you have any comments, inquiries, feedback, etc., email us at bustyasianbeautiespod@gmail.com. See you guys next time. Bye.